Payne Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Payne Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
If every baseball game was exactly like what was played at Nats Park last night, I think the game would be infinitely more popular. I may get some pushback on that, but it was a 2-hour and 11-minute game. It was well pitched. The starters both went deep. There was a home run, which essentially decided the game. That was fun to watch. I like baseball. I don't like 3.5-hour baseball games. They pretty much eliminated that with the pitch clock. But this was really fun. It was a fun night at Nats Park. We'll go over that. Orioles are maybe getting hot now, hot enough to get into the postseason. We'll have to see, but they're playing much better now. And the hockey playoffs are off and rolling. Hockey playoffs, more than that. Hockey Stanley Cup Finals and the NBA Finals start tonight. And this is really a cool idea. I really like this. We've known for a while that T.J. Oshie is done. He missed all of this season with back problems. He was kind of in and out the year before. He's now 38 years old, and it has not been officially announced yet, but it's going to be announced on Monday when they have this event at 5 o'clock at the Fountains in Georgetown, where the Caps celebrated the Stanley Cup 7 years ago. That's not only the best championship celebration we've ever had in this town, that's got to be up there among all-time championship celebrations. I'd like to hear about another one that was better, because this was absolutely great, the way they brought the cup back from Vegas and celebrated with it for a week and dove in the fountains and let people know where they were on social media as they hopped around town to celebrate with the cup. This was really great. Look, the Redskins had 3 Super Bowl championship celebrations. One of them was in pouring down rain after they beat the Dolphins, and the team was on DC Transit buses. Yeah, that's before they changed the name to Metro. DC Transit, and there was like 500,000 people in the rain to watch that. When they won with the Doug Williams team in 1988, they went to the White House on like these open buses, so you could wave to the players, out the window, and Dexter Manley with a cigar and the trophy in his hand, and then they went to the White House, where Ronald Reagan, said, "Where's Ricky Sanders?" And he threw a pass to Ricky Sanders, and that was great. And then the last one in 1992, that was, I think it was on the steps of, might have been the Lincoln Memorial. I'm not sure, but it was not a parade as far as I remember. Those were all great. Those were terrific. But the way the Caps celebrated that cup 7 years ago was really cool. So on Monday will be the 7th anniversary of the team eliminating Vegas and winning the one Stanley Cup that the organization has won with Alex Ovechkin, the MVP. T.J. Oshie, who remained a teammate, is going to call it quits at 5 o'clock. It's open to the public, and that should be a really cool event. As for the start of the Stanley Cup Finals, we had a good game last night, won in overtime by Edmonton 4-3. They came from 3-2 down to win. Last year, the Panthers went up 3-0, as you may remember, and they had a shutout win to start the series. Edmonton made it dramatic. They tied the series but lost in Game 7, and now they get a jump with an overtime goal from Leon Draisaitl. Wayne Gretzky, who is, I guess, you'd have to say, the most famous Canadian, right, of all time, and was, I guess, at his peak with the Edmonton Oilers. That's where he won his 4 straight cups, and then the team even won one without him. That's how good they were as a team. But he's part of the Fox coverage, and this was his feel on Edmonton taking Game 1 at home last night.
I think this game for them to win was more important than for Florida to win. Florida is going to be saying, okay, we know it's a long series. We got to get ready for Game 2. We'll correct our mistakes. We'll be a better hockey club Game 2. But on the other side of things now, Edmonton's got some energy and some enthusiasm. And as you said, this hockey club believes now. And this was a big win for not only their hockey club, but for the city of Edmonton. Quite frankly, now people in Canada, they're all so excited about maybe a Canadian team winning the Stanley Cup.
And, with the way things are politically here in the United States, I wonder how many people are rooting for a Canadian team to win. Do you want the team from the home state of the president to win? Not I. So, yeah, you go, Edmonton. You go win this series. And Connor McDavid, they talked about this last night on PTI. Connor McDavid doesn't really need a Stanley Cup to legitimize his place among the greatest players who ever played, but it helps. You know, if you got that, you shut people up. If Alex Ovechkin doesn't win the Cup 7 years ago, I think we're talking about him at a different level. And now that he has the Cup, he has the all-time goal-scoring record, you can safely place him among the greats who ever played. All right, on to baseball for last night. And as I say, a 2-hour and 11-minute game, which was really bizarre the way it all unfolded. Mackenzie Gore, who's leading the major leagues in strikeouts, I believe he has 108 now after his performance last night, got into a jam in the first inning. He loaded the bases with nobody out, then got out of it, and went on to pitch 6 more shutout innings, which was enough for the Nationals to come back and win. They got a home run in the 7th inning. It was Ahmad Rosario, and the Cubs starter, Matthew Boyd, he took a perfect game into the 6th inning. He was tremendous last night, but the mistake he gave up there proved to be costly as again, the Nationals were able to put another run across and win the game 2-0. This was Davey on Mackenzie Gore getting out of that first.
Absolutely, and we talked about it after he came out of the game. That was a big moment. I mean, to me, you look back, that was a critical inning, right? Trying to get out of that first inning. And we talked a little bit about it, and I said, hey, that's maturity on your part. It really is. I mean, things could have spiraled for you really quick. And he made a comment, said, yeah, I'm getting better at that. I said, no, you're getting really good at it now. So continue to do that. I mean, that's who you are. I mean, your stuff is good. Attack the strike zone, and he was fabulous today.
Yeah, Gore, this is, again, more on this first inning as he's got the bases loaded, gets out of it, and goes on to pitch a gem.
I mean, I don't know if anything switched for me. You just don't want him to score. I mean, the first 2 hits were broken bats. So it's just kind of understand that's where we're at, 1 pitch at a time, and we were able to get 2 strikeouts and then, get a foul ball. So it was a big inning, and able to get out of that was great.
Do you think the 2024 version of Mackenzie Gore gets out of that the way you did tonight?
I'm going to tell you yes. But I mean, it really doesn't matter. But we did a good job. Riley was good. We took it 1 pitch at a time, and we got out, the heart of their lineup, and it was a big inning.
Yeah, I mean, those 3 hits were the only 3 hits he gave up in the game. He gave up a walk. That was the 1 walk that he gave up, and struck out 7 to again increase his league-leading total. And he's having a great year. This you really can't tell by wins and losses. Hasn't gotten much support throughout the season. He's 3-5. With the win, but his ERA, a very, very respectable 2.87, and again, leading the major leagues in strikeouts. He's developing into the pitcher that they hoped that he would be in the Juan Soto trade. And, as you look at all the players who have borne fruit from that deal, looks like Mike Rizzo made a hell of a deal there. Would you like to have Juan Soto on your team? Yes, you would. Would you like to have him with a $756 million contract? I don't think so. And a little bit later on in the show, we'll get into what's going on with Paul Skeens with the Pittsburgh Pirates and Rob Manfred trying to saddle up a salary cap one more time. I don't know if he's going to get it, but there's just, more and more evidence that baseball really needs this. We had a World Series with the Yankees and the Dodgers, which is, I think, good for baseball. Television ratings were good. You get the 2 best players in the game on the biggest stage with Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge. But there's the haves and the really have-nots in baseball. The separation is huge. Maybe that's okay. Maybe the game looks at it and the people who run it and say, okay, we can live with that. But if you're living in one of those cities, that doesn't spend any money. Miami does from time to time. They're not now. They're a last-place team. Pittsburgh doesn't spend money. Last-place team. Colorado is horrid, though they do have 12 wins, so they won 3 in a row. But beyond that, they absolutely stink. Baltimore did spend money, but they're just climbing out of a big hole now. I think it might be a hole that's too big. And then Chicago is horrendous. Do you really want that in baseball? And I think what we're seeing for what Mike Rizzo did in a situation where they knew that they were not going to pay Juan Soto what Boris was going to demand. They knew he would get more money someplace else, which he did from the Mets. But what they did in that deal, and it was, not the deal with the Mets, where Soto is going to apparently play out the rest of his career, it was with San Diego. And where is San Diego right now? A pretty good team. They're a game behind the Dodgers, so they're a contending team right now. But the prospects that they gave up in that deal and no longer have Juan Soto, whatever they got from the Yankees in the deal last year or the year before last, we'll see, how that plays out long term. So far, so pretty good for them, but it's also been very good for the Nationals. As for the Orioles and climbing out of that hole, they did sweep the Chicago White Sox, who stink. And if they get a win today at Seattle, they beat a first-place team 3 straight. So things are starting to pick up. Adley Rutschman, who was in a terrible slump, homered last night in their 3-2 win and said this.
It's awesome. We're playing good ball right now. Pitching is doing amazing. Hitters are, picking up runs late, and it just feels like things are flowing a little bit, and our guys are playing together, picking each other up, and that's kind of what we've done the last 2 years, and it feels nice to, play some games where things are coming together.
Sioux, they go for the sweep this afternoon. Again, the coverage here on ESPN 630 at 3 o'clock. One more story on a game played by people who use bats and balls. It's softball. It's played by women, and it's played in the Women's College World Series, which is a best 2 out of 3, and they played Game 1 last night in Oklahoma City. And Texas won the game thanks to something that could never happen in Major League Baseball anymore. Now, I remember this happening in the World Series. It was 50 years ago, and it was one of the great World Series of all time with the Carlton Fisk home run and the Reds winning against the Red Sox in 7. But in that series, the Red Sox were apparently trying to walk Johnny Bench, give him an intentional walk. And, Bench is like asleep at the plate, figuring, okay, it's going to be a walk. And I guess it got to 3-2, and he wasn't paying attention, and they slipped the fastball by him for a strike. So now that you have the intentional walk where you can just put a guy on, we don't have that anymore. They don't have those intentional walks in softball. So Texas and Texas Tech up 1-0 in the 6th inning. And they have at the plate a hitter who had not had a hit in the entire World Series. Reese Atwood at the plate. Najee Kanadi, who had been on fire, attempting to intentionally walk Atwood with 2 runners on base. And while the intentional walk was apparently on, the pitches were very, very close to the plate. And when the pitch count was 3-0, Atwood took a chance, reached over the plate, and connected and smacked it through the infield. Brought home 2 runners. Longhorns go up 2-1. Texas Tech fails to score, and Texas wins the game. Atwood singled her first hit in the College World Series this year. She's gone 0 for 10. And now Texas can lock things up tonight if they win Game 2. Texas Tech, if they win, will force a Game 3 tomorrow night. I don't know how much time is actually saved by the intentional pass now in baseball. You could have some of the dramatics have been taken out of it, including that the catcher could have a brain lapse and have a pass ball. There are all kinds of things that could happen. It just seems like as a time saver, that didn't save that much time. But that's the way it is in baseball. You just say, I want to put him on first base, and you can do that. Softball doesn't happen, so we had a game decided last night because in an apparent intentional walk situation, the batter who had been 0 for 10 in the College World Series reaches over the plate, drives in a single, and it plates 2 runs, and Texas wins the game. I'm not suggesting that baseball revisit this and say, hey, let's bring back the ability to have the 4-pitch walk. But it definitely is something extra in a game, and in this case, it decided a very important game, Game 1 of the College World Series championship. And if Texas wins tonight, they wrap things up, they win the title, and who knows how things go if the pitcher puts the ball in the proper place and completes the intentional walk. All right, let's take a visit to Ashburn from yesterday. The flowers that are being thrown at Daron Payne. Maybe it's motivation. He's motivated because he's about to cash the biggest check of his deal. I'm assuming they have some off ramps, so they won't have to pay him the whole $26 million if he's not on the team. But from what was said yesterday, Daron Payne is not only going to be on the team this year, but he's going to take a step forward in what will be his 8th year in the organization. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
This odd dance that the players do with management in the offseason, these OTAs, the voluntary workouts that they're voluntary, but they really would like you to be there. And the participation this year, not quite what it was last year. 2 guys missing. They're relatively new. Marshawn Lattimore, acquired at the trade deadline last year, didn't play very well, was hurt most of the time he was here last season. And Laramie Tunsil, who they picked up in the offseason, known for not participating in these things with Houston. They're not too worried about that. And then Terry McLaurin, who's negotiating a contract, and he did this 2 years ago or 3 years ago when he was trying to work out a new deal. These workouts, these quote-unquote voluntary workouts, end tomorrow. Next week is mandatory minicamp. And the question is, will they have Terry McLaurin signed before that starts next Tuesday? We'll have to see. I would think they would, but I would also think that if McLaurin misses this minicamp, it's not going to have a huge bearing on how he plays this year or his standing with the team. What came out of yesterday was somewhat surprising because, Daron Payne was part of an operation here that clearly didn't know what it was doing. I mean, the drafts under Ron Rivera have turned out to be horrendous. All 4 of his first-round picks are no longer with the team. Just a complete whiff on that. And as far as how they manage the salary cap and who they paid, well, Jonathan Allen, who they paid a lot of money, he's now gone. He's with Minnesota. And Daron Payne, who was coming off a really great season in 2022, signed a big extension heading into the 2023 season, a $90 million extension. He was coming off a year where he had 11.5 sacks, but he's been kind of blah last 2 years, just 4 sacks in each of the last 2 years. And he's heading into the biggest part of that contract. He's due to make $26 million this year, and he has 2 years left on that contract. Sometimes guys are motivated by such things, but he's come into these off-season workouts looking good. I don't think the coaching staff had to say this in any way, given that they're due to pay him all that money this year. I don't think that they're just making this up. This is Joe Whitt, the defensive coordinator, talking to the media yesterday about what he's seen in Daron Payne.
The guy that, to me, he just looks really good. He looks intentful. Daron Payne, man, like every day, this dude is – I'm having to tell him, hey, man, let's calm down. Like I got in trouble with the head coach yesterday because I challenged the D-line and he went after it. And I said, Q, that was my fault. I told him to do. He did exactly what I told him to do. And so I've been really pleased. The walkthroughs, everything that we've asked him to do. And he's a leader. He doesn't talk much at all. All right, but he is leading by example, and this year you can really see him taking that leadership role and taking it to the next step. So I would say he's been the guy that's just really stood out to me the most from that standpoint.
That's Joe Whitt, defensive coordinator. Got a second from the head coach, Dan Quinn.
I walked past him today. I said, man, you've had a remarkable offseason. And I felt that way through the drill work, through the skill, and everyone, you just see something that jumps out differently, that's onto a new space, and I felt that from him coming into this off season, and I've certainly been impressed by what I've seen so far. In fact, it was like literally today that I said, man, I've really been impressed by the work that you've put in this off season, and I see it, happening out on the field.
Yeah, again, they're in shorts and not hitting the way that you would during the regular season, and maybe some of what they're saying is motivation talk for him, but they're saying it, and they don't have to say it because he's due to get paid a lot of money. But, often when you see a guy in that situation, he's already seen Jonathan Allen dumped here, and he doesn't want that to happen to him, wants to collect all the cash. And he is, I guess, doing everything they want him to do. Here's more react from Payne himself.
I just been really just trying to work hard, just coming in, just trying to show the young boys how to do it by just doing it. And just going out, training hard every day, and then reloading in the morning and coming back the next day, trying to do it again. After the season, you get to talk with all the coaches and all that stuff. And I know Coach Tapp, he challenged me to be a leader. I feel like I'm a guy. I come to work, do what I got to do, and I get on with my life. You feel me? But so I've just been challenging myself to be a leader, and just going out there and just working hard.
Well, run defense was a problem last year. They ranked third against the pass, 189 yards a game, tied for 11th in sacks. But against the run, from Nikki Javala's story here in the Post, it was near the bottom of the NFL. 30th in opponent rushing yards per game, 137.5. 28th in yards allowed per rush, 4.8. And 26th in defensive rush EPA per game. Just 3 teams allowed more rushing yards before contact, 1.9 yards a carry. So run defense is an issue. Daron Payne is a tackle. Yes, he had a bunch of sacks a few years ago, but they want him to stop the run. And if he's in shape and if he's ready to step up in year 8 with the team, so be it. If he's playing for his contract, so be it. But what they've seen so far in whatever these offseason workouts are worth, they've been impressed by that. As for the Terry McLaurin deal and when it might get done, again, the OTAs wrap up tomorrow, and then the mandatory minicamp is next week. Could we have McLaurin under contract before then? Albert Breer, SI.com, addressing it yesterday.
Well, the mandatory stuff begins next week. So will this be done before the mandatory minicamp? I think that's a moving target. But I do think that something gets done before the start of training camp. I just think he's too important to the program there. He's too important to what they've built for them to mess around on this one. This is not the guy that you go to war with over a few dollars. It's not an easy contract by any measure. He is a little bit older, and he is on a third contract. So those can, by definition, be a little trickier. But when you're talking about the culture that Dan Quinn and Adam Peters were able to build in their first year, Terry McLaurin is really central to all of it. So then the question becomes, how do you build a contract for him? And again, this is a guy who he hasn't been a 1,500 or 1,600 yard guy, but he's been consistently in that 1,100 yard range over the last few years. He's come up huge in big spots. He had 13 touchdowns last year. And then you look at the top of the receiver market and where that sits right now, and it's in a different spot than it was a year ago. You've got Justin Jefferson, of course, out there at $35 million per year. You've got CeeDee Lamb out there at $34 million per year. And here I think is the comp. It's DK Metcalf in Pittsburgh, and he's at $33 million per year. Now, DK Metcalf did a little bit of a different deal than he did for his second contract. His second contract was a 3-year extension. This is a 4-year extension. So he essentially gave the team a little bit more control to get the number he wanted. That's $33 million. So does that become the solution here? I'm not sure. But I'd be surprised if Terry McLaurin didn't do a deal that was over $30 million per year. I think he's earned it. Again, he's a captain. He's really important to what they're building there in Washington. He's really important to your young quarterback. He's going into a contract year. This is why it's smart to do a shorter term extension. And if you look back, the guys in that draft class, interestingly enough, Deebo Samuel is one of them who did a shorter deal, who did a three-year deal, now been traded to the Commanders, and he's in the final year of his deal. DK Metcalf did a 3-year deal. He's able to negotiate a new deal, and now Terry McLaurin is in that spot. Certainly I think the Commanders are going to endeavor to get something done before the start of training camp. Maybe it gets done before the mini camp, but I certainly think by the time we get to the middle of the summer, there is some sort of agreement to bring Terry McLaurin back. And I do think that he is going to be in that range, somewhere between $30 and $35 million per year. And again, the length is a question. The total, average per year is a moving target. But this is a guy who's been so durable, so consistent, such a great leader. He's somebody you have to reward, and somebody you're not going to regret rewarding, because you can point to him if you're Dan Quinn and saying, that's what we pay. That's the kind of guy that we reward.
Albert Breer of SI.com. I think he's right. If you're going to continue to push this brotherhood thing, and they've been really good at that, yeah, I mean, you have to say to the rest of the team, look, he's been an exemplary player through the 6 years he's been here. And up until last year, he was playing for a mess of an organization and never had a quarterback. He didn't even have a good quarterback, much less a great quarterback like Jaden Daniels last year. And they've got great chemistry going there. I think he's right. You cannot upset that by playing hardball with Terry McLaurin. 6 years, I believe he's only missed one game in that time. Played with 12 different quarterbacks. First time he's gotten through a season playing with the same guy every start, every game. Yeah, I mean, they had Marcus Mariota play some when Daniels got hurt, but by and large, what has happened between the two of them is exactly what you want to happen. A veteran guy, a leader, helping to indoctrinate this rookie into the league, and it's worked incredibly well. Now, the flip side of that on McLaurin is he an elite receiver? Is he among the best in the league and worthy of being paid at the top dollar, $30 to $35 million a year? I think you could make the case that he's not. I don't think he's tracking to be a Hall of Fame receiver. I think he's an excellent receiver. Another thing is, he came into the league, he was not 20 years old. He was 23 or maybe even close to 24 because he had taken a redshirt year at Ohio State. But he never complains. He is exactly the type of example that you want as a football player. He's revered by his teammates. So there's some value in that. And as they're still trying to build, I mean, they made a remarkable step forward with the culture and everything else from last year. But there's still room to grow there. And the benchmark now is the Philadelphia Eagles. Are they the Philadelphia Eagles? No, they're not. And we saw what happened in the NFC Championship game. Philadelphia was significantly better. And they got to get through Philadelphia twice just to get to the playoffs. And once they get there, if they go far, it's quite possible they'll meet Philadelphia again this year. And, if you're going to get there, it's going to take more than just re-signing Terry McLaurin and hoping that Jaden Daniels improves even more than he did last year. So there's a lot there, and I think that with the cap room that they have, they might be willing to overpay Terry McLaurin, not necessarily for what he's done on the field, although he's been excellent and had a great year last year, but to pay him for his service. He's one of the ones that has helped to lead him out of the desert, kind of the Moses of the wide receiver room, and so, yeah, reward him. Yeah, give him a contract that probably overpays him for his talent, because he's not a top 10 receiver. Is he a top 20? Yeah, maybe. But if you're going to pay him like a top 3 or 4 receiver, you're paying him for more than the production that he's going to give you on the field. But he's got something really good going on with Jaden Daniels, and you don't want to upset that in any way. And you want to keep Jaden happy. You don't want to say, hey, yeah, we're paying hardball with Terry. You're not going to have him throughout the training camp. Now, you got to have him, and they will have him signed before training camp. I guess the only real question is, will they get this done before next week? And I think they probably will. I don't know if you saw this. We talked about it when it happened, but there's more information now where Derek Carr is confirming, yeah, I left a hell of a lot of money on the table. Derek Carr pulled a shocker, retired after 11 years in the NFL with the Saints, even though he was due a hell of a lot of guaranteed money. He was set to make $30 million this season, had 2 years left on a 4-year, $150 million deal. He's going to get a $10 million roster bonus, but he's not getting that $30 million. Now, you can say, he's made a boatload of money in his career. In fact, he has. He's made $196 million in career earnings. So nobody has to hold a benefit for Derek Carr. Derek Carr is going to be fine for the rest of his life, and he'll probably follow his brother David Carr, who was once the number one pick of the draft and got the crap beat out of him with the Houston Texans, and now is working for the NFL Network. There's probably going to be some broadcasting work in his future. But here's all he had to do. I say all he had to do. Nobody wants to have surgery. But his shoulder was going to need surgery, and if he had it, he would have been out for the entire season. And he said, I know this sounds crazy, but I just didn't want to take the Saints' money. He said, I never played just for the money. I had a whole bunch of people tell me how crazy I was. Man, I would never have done that. That's all cool, but I gained all these things that the world has to offer, and it doesn't really do anything for your heart. I knew my heart was at peace, and that's what really mattered. He said, my agent literally texted me a few days ago and said, hey, just checking. How's everything? You still feel comfortable with the decision? And I sent him a picture of me on the beach with my two kids playing, and I said, this beats an OTA any day. And he said, yeah, I thought so. He said, I'm doing great and have thoroughly enjoyed being home. Well, we'll see what happens once the season starts, whether he gets itchy again. I would not be shocked if he comes back to play. I don't know whether he's going to have the shoulder surgery, so maybe it is over for him. But he's played 11 years, 33. I mean, we saw Tom Brady play into his mid-40s. There would be demand for him. I don't know what the Saints are going to do. Their quarterbacks are Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener. We saw both of them in the game against the Commanders last year, and they drafted a rookie who's 25 years old in Tyler Shug. Rattler was 0-6 last year as a starter. Haener went 0-1. I guess they get into the Arch Manning sweepstakes, which further, brings intrigue to that organization, because probably the next to Drew Brees, the most famous player in the history of that organization is Archie Manning. Archie Manning had the misfortune of being the number 2 pick of the 1971 draft by the New Orleans Saints, who are horrendous most of the time. I mean, he came in 71. It wasn't until 82 that they kept track of sacks. He may have been the most sacked quarterback of all time. He had no offensive line, no team, and I think the best they did in his entire time with New Orleans was 8-8. They were a mess. And so if Arch Manning comes out, and that may be another factor, you have the Mannings still are in New Orleans. They're royalty in that city. And I think Archie, who once engineered a move to make sure that his son Eli didn't wind up with the San Diego Chargers and wind up with the New York Giants, is probably going to investigate that situation before his grandson decides what to do. Now, it's possible Arch Manning, even if he wins the Heisman Trophy this year, that he's going to come back for another year at Texas, and probably should. He's played 2 games in the 2 years that he's been out of high school. Started 2 games. He's played a little bit here and there for Texas, but he's been on the bench. This is his team now. And if he's great, if he's worldly, maybe he says, now's the time. I'm going to go to the NFL. Either way, it's not going to be about money. He makes a boatload of money in NIL, staying at Texas, even though he hasn't played. But if he goes to the NFL, he'll get more money, but they don't need more money. The Manning family prints money. His dad, even though he never played in the NFL, has carved out a media career, and they got deals with DraftKings and things like that. So they're fine. So that's going to be one to watch. But it's one thing if you work for like a charitable organization, or you work for a company that's kind of struggling along and you leave some money on the table, but I would question Derek Carr here and what he did. I know it seems like a very nice thing, and he can never be accused of just being a money-hungry, greedy athlete. But on the other hand, the NFL prints money. The New Orleans Saints, whether they had to pay out the $30 million to him for rehabbing a shoulder injury or having him leave it on the table, that doesn't mean bupkis to them. NFL teams make a lot of money. They get a lot of money. And him doing what he did, it's a nice gesture, and he'll be remembered fondly by the fan base. It's not like the Saints were thinking, okay, now we can pay the electric bill because he's not taking that $30 million. All right, enough on that. Coming up in the next hour, we will get to what Dan Quinn said about the culture of the team and how it's developing as they continue to add players. And Robert Ory, who's now an analyst with the Lakers, says, yes, Luka Doncic can play defense. We'll see. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. So when do you hear what Jeff Garland did last week? This is stunning. Get to that in just a minute here, because I think that's a good way to kick off this 10 o'clock hour. Also, later this hour, Seth Wickersham, who wrote the book about quarterbacks that touched off a firestorm a few weeks ago, where he talked about Caleb Williams and his dad attempting to blow up the draft, that they had all kinds of ideas cooked up to make sure that they didn't go to the Chicago Bears at number 1, a place where his dad said quarterbacks go to die. Seth Wickersham yesterday on the Rich Eisen Show with follow-up on that, and one day maybe somebody will be able to do it, but not anytime soon. This Jeff Garland thing really got me laughing today. I really like him. He's, of course, been on Curb Your Enthusiasm for the entire run of that show. I guess it's now finally over. He's 62 years old. He's done very, very well. He's had a number of television series, The Goldbergs. He's had roles in movies and his voice in Toy Story. Jeff Garland is I'm sure, a very, very wealthy man. Not that he doesn't want to keep the skill of stand-up comedy sharp. Jay Leno made $1 gazillion doing The Tonight Show, but he liked to keep himself sharp doing stand-up comedy all over the country. Jerry Seinfeld, I think still does stand-up comedy. They don't do it for the money. So Garland agreed to headline a comedy dinner at the Calabasas Country Club in California last week for $800 in cash. Seems like a small amount of money, $800, but he wanted it in cash. So he gets there last week, a week ago, and the people who were booking the event said, okay, here's your $800, except it was in a check for $800. And Garland walked out. Now, there are only about 40 people there for the event. I guess it was a very nice country club. And, hey, we can get Jeff Garland for stand-up, and he only wants $800 to do it. Okay, we'll give it to him. And he said, yeah, but make sure it's in cash. And when he didn't get it in cash, he walked out, left them sitting there without the entertainment. And people, wonder, $800? Really? He just didn't want to pay the taxes on $800? One observer, somebody who's, I guess, close to him, said, Jeff can be a very neurotic guy. He can get hung up on things. He started his career in stand-up in Chicago in the 80s, was a member of the Second City group that launched others, such as Steve Carell and Stephen Colbert. They were both there. It leads me to a story that maybe you've heard me tell before, but there was a great biography that was written by Richard Ben Kramer just a year or two after Joe DiMaggio died. It's one of the great biographies I ever read, and it gives me one of the great stories that would relate to something like this. Rocky Marciano also was famous for this, that he would make appearances and he didn't want to pay income taxes, so made sure he got paid in cash. And he would sometimes, fly. That's what killed him. He died in a plane crash where he was flying back from an event where he was paid in cash to make an appearance. So anyway, Joe DiMaggio is sitting in, I think this was this Oakland or San Francisco? I forget, 1989 World Series. Might have been Candlestick Park. And we remember we had the earthquake there, which delayed the World Series for a week. Well, the earthquake comes and the earthquake goes, and the damage was not really to Candlestick Park. The rumbles could be felt there, but most of the damage was in other parts of the city, which included a bridge collapse. But, DiMaggio sitting in his seat goes, okay, well, the earthquake's over. Spent his whole life in the San Francisco area, except, of course, when he's playing for the Yankees. And he's thinking to himself, okay, this is past. Let's play the damn game. And then he's told, wait a minute, we've gotten word that the area where your home is, it's on fire. So now DiMaggio says, we got to get out of here. So he leaves the ballpark. They drive him to his home. He gets there. There's some smoke damage from some houses nearby, but his house is okay. He runs upstairs in the house, and he comes down with this enormous garbage bag in his hands. And somebody says, let me take that from you, Mr. DiMaggio. No! And it turned out in this enormous garbage bag was, and I forget the number, how high it was, but it seems to me $40,000 in cash sticks in my mind. That he had $40,000 in cash under his bed. And this was money that he would collect from like autograph shows, or he would go into a room and he would have to sign a bunch of bats. And he demanded that he be paid in cash so he wouldn't have to pay the taxes. That was $40,000 at least. Jeff Garland walking out because the check he was supposed to get, $800, which, is tip money for a guy like that, was in a check and not cash, and he was worried about maybe having to pay income taxes on it. Crazy. That is one, as we say, Meshuggah story. More from Commanders camp. The camp or OTAs, voluntary, whatever. The mandatory is next week. They have the mini camp, which I think is 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. They usually blow off Thursday, and then they're free until training camp starts at the end of July. They also did confirm, by the way, yesterday that 2 of the exhibition games, they have 3 exhibition games. 2 of them, first one they play at New England. They're going to work out with the Patriots, just like they did last year with the Jets. And one other team last year, might have been New England, I don't know. But they're going to do that again. And then the final exhibition game is against Baltimore here, and the Ravens are going to come down and work out in Ashburn before that. That's probably where the NFL is going to go once they finally do away with these silly exhibition games. They do it for the money and the TV and all that they get from them. But when they go to 18 games, you're going to have 2 exhibition games. The first one will be something. Players will play a little bit, and the second one they'll just basically blow off like they do now. But once they get to 20 games, and I think 20 games is going to happen within the next 5 or 6 years, once they get to 20 games, there'll be no exhibition games, and teams will just practice against one another for a few days. This was Dan Quinn yesterday about adding the veterans to the team this year, as the culture that they established last year has been set, and how these guys are being blended in.
I think first that's you give credit to Adam and his staff. They have such a unique understanding of what the team needs too. And we had said way back, hey, this isn't for everybody, but for the people that are so much about one another and getting better and doing those things, like those are important things to us. Like one of the main things for the players starting off to be here, like, can you be an awesome teammate? Like top of the pile. Then it gets into like your role, what that can mean, how good can you get at these specific things, and then we go from there. But it has to be, man, like being a great teammate first. And so like, yeah, no doubt, Dan, like that's important for everybody. But how do you live that, and how do you demonstrate that, and how do you show that to one another? Because not everybody's outspoken, or like not like giving each other greeting cards every day. But there's spaces that you fill in that you're helping one another, see how good you can get. And that to me is all part of it. I never wanted to be like having a good time and working your ass off to be in opposition of one another. Like I wanted those 2 things to happen simultaneously, like having a great time, and we were like absolutely emptying it out to go work hard. And so when I see practices like yesterday, like today, you probably didn't see as much of the speed. We had so much more in the red zone, but like yesterday, it was speed, man. It was the Ashburn relays. We wanted to see how fast we could go without the contact, without that, but how fast we could go. And you push each other to do that. If you were running the route and I'm keeping up, like we are pushing each other, not in a combative way, but definitely in a competitive way. And I do think the players here have created that. Like, man, they do enjoy it. There's a good vibe that we have, but like we also put it in. And if you don't, you'll get exposed pretty quickly, because the tempo of which we want to practice at is high. So like if you don't put in the work, it'll look rough for you.
at Dan Quinn yesterday. Joe Whitt, defensive coordinator, also talked. Defense, particularly in the early part of the season, was a big problem. Got better at the end, but really never against the run. These are the numbers that Nikki Javala has in her story in the Post today. Washington closed out the season ranked third against the pass, 189 yards allowed per game, tied for 11th in sacks, but against the run, it sat near the bottom of the NFL, ranking 30th in opponent rushing yards a game, 137.5, 28th in yards allowed per rush, almost 5 yards a carry, 4.8, and 26th in offensive rush EPA per game. Just 3 teams allowed more rushing yards before contact, almost 2 yards a carry. That's an issue. Those are issues, I should say, for the defense. What bothers Joe Whitt more is the fact that they're not turning the ball over.
We didn't produce the ball like I wanted to, that I envisioned us to. Now, the reason being, we dropped 16 of them. Literally just balls that touched our hands that we felt that should have been caught. If we catch half of those, that puts us in a different ring. We didn't play the run well enough, and I thought that we would have. And so if we can, and then the third thing, closing games out, it wasn't the way that I was anticipating. And so when we get into the offseason, we look at it in 3 different things. Okay, all right, was it schematics? Was it the player? Or, or sometimes we just get beat, So, and then we went from a change, adjust, emphasis, Did we need to change some things? Are we adjusting? Are we going to emphasize some areas? And so the turnovers we're going to emphasize because we just have to catch the ball. Some of the things we're doing with the front for the run game, we have changed, and some we have adjusted. And so, and then winning time moments in 2 minutes, we're going to competition every day to get those things better.
Now, they were the beneficiary of a bunch of games that were decided on the last possession. I think 7 of the wins were last possession wins. So while maybe he didn't close out games the way they wanted to on defense, definitely on offense they did. And a lot of that was Jaden Daniels. You think about the game that locked up the playoffs for them when they beat Atlanta on that Sunday night game, last possession in overtime and they win the game. That's what they did so well. Some of those things may go the other way. So while the defense may be better at closing out games, I don't think you can count on that kind of success for the offense because there is some luck involved with that, and they did have a lot of that last year. The big defensive yak over the offseason was the tush push, which is going to stay, although it was pretty close in the vote at the owners' meetings. Dan Quinn has said, no, I don't want to get rid of it. I want to learn how to stop it. Frankie Louvu, who created probably more attention for it than anybody last season, jumping over the pile in that NFC Championship game before the referee finally said, hey, if you keep doing that, we're just going to give Philadelphia a touchdown. This is the Joe Whitt take on the tush push sticking around.
It's a good play, man. And, if I just go by the rules, and it's a legal play, and they're good at it. And we have to figure out a way to stop it. We play them twice. And so I think we have some good ideas, but, it is what it is. It's a good play. So I haven't really been thinking about it right now, though, but we will. We play them twice, and and they have a great quarterback that can run it. He's a 600-pound squatter, so it's hard to stop him.
Yeah, who wouldn't want to be a 600-pound squatter? You wouldn't want to weigh 600 pounds and be able to squat. You'd probably want to be able to squat 600 pounds. Last thing is who's not there. That Terry McLaurin is not at the workouts because he's negotiating a new contract. So we'll see if they get that done before the mandatory minicamp starts next Tuesday. Also not there, Laramie Tunsil, who they gave up a lot to get him. I'd imagine he's going to be at minicamp next week. He's under contract. And Marshawn Lattimore, who, if he doesn't significantly improve this season, this is going to go down as a mistake on Adam Peters' part. It's a little bit early on that one. I don't think they would have gone any further if Marshawn Lattimore was completely healthy and played better after he came here in the trade with the Saints at the trade deadline. But he's got to step up his game to make that deal worthwhile. And the fact that he's not at these off-season workouts, which are voluntary, but, most of the players have felt the need to be there. How he performs when the season starts, will we look back on this and say, well, he wasn't all in. There's only 2 more days of that. It's today and tomorrow, and then next week they go to the mandatory minicamp. This is Whitt on Lattimore as a no-show.
Okay, Marshawn hasn't been here. We've been in communication with him. So when he gets here, we'll see exactly where he is from a conditioning standpoint. From a mental standpoint, the coaches have been meeting with him, talking with him. And so he's a smart young man, but we'll see exactly where he is when he gets here.
Okay. Well, we'll see him when he gets here. Next week is mandatory. The other thing to take away from yesterday, both Joe Whitt and Dan Quinn raving about Daron Payne, about how Daron Payne has stepped up. And I think Daron Payne saw the handwriting on the wall as they unloaded Jonathan Allen in the offseason. Payne signed that extension after the 2022 season, after he got 11 and a half sacks. Last 2 years under that monster deal, 4 years, $90 million, hadn't done much, hasn't played well. And if he's going to justify being paid $26 million this year, he's got to come in and look good. And so far, for whatever this means, because it's players working out in shorts and no shoulder pads, it's helmets and shorts, he's looked good. But let's see when the real stuff starts to happen. All right, coming up, more follow-up on the Seth Wickersham kind of bombshell that came out a couple of weeks ago that Caleb Williams and his dad were looking to, quote, blow up the draft and be able to go to any team they wanted to go to, particularly not the Chicago Bears, where, as his father said, quarterbacks go to die. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Bram is coming up at 11 o'clock. Here's a cute story that I just scrolled through. It's from Pro Football Talk. I don't know if you saw this last week, but it may have been just an honest mistake from somebody in the social media department with the Atlanta Falcons. I'll have to ask my nephew, who works for the team. I'm going to see him this weekend. But they put up a social media post of two players. One was wearing jersey number 28, and the other wearing number 3. Well, that's two sensitive numbers for the Falcons because, as you know, the 28-3 lead is what they had against the New England Patriots before they blew it and lost in overtime. So they put up another picture of players wearing number 34 and 1. And somebody said, hey, it's impossible to have a score of 34-1. You can't blow that. Well, you actually can. And there is a rule in place which makes that possible. 1 point is scored when what otherwise be a safety happens during a conversion attempt, and either team, the team attempting the conversion or the team defending it, could end up surrendering 1 point on the play. An example of that, how you could get the 34-1. This is from Mike Florio. First, the Falcons would score 4 touchdowns, convert 4 extra points. Then, after the 5th touchdown, the Falcons, for example, would line up for a 1-point attempt. The kick would be blocked. The other team would recover it, run as far as the end zone in an effort to score 2, but the team would fumble short of the goal line. The Falcons would recover the field of play, and the player with the ball would backtrack to the other end zone and would be tackled for a 1-point safety. I didn't know that. Yeah, you can have a 1-point safety on that. So it's a little-known rule. It's been in place, I guess, for 10 years. It's yet to happen in an NFL game, but it could conceivably happen. We could have a 1-point safety occur in an NFL game. So for whatever that's worth, that is in play. Also from the NFL, the firestorm that was created by Seth Wickersham, who's written a book about quarterbacks, writing about how Caleb Williams finally consented to go to the Chicago Bears when he and his dad were looking at all kinds of scenarios where he could avoid going to where his father said quarterbacks go to die. And outside of Sid Luckman, they haven't had a Hall of Fame quarterback, and Luckman played in the 1940s. Jim McMahon was good. He was not great, and the 85 Bears are known for their defense, not for Jim McMahon at quarterback. He was the funky QB who kept everybody loose and a lot of times just handed the ball off to Walter Payton. He was tough, but he's certainly not in the pantheon of greats. So there was reason to think, this is not a place we want to go. We want to go someplace else. They even talked about the idea of going to the UFL for a year and then coming back to the NFL as an unrestricted free agent. I think there'd be some legal maneuverings involved with that. And it brought back memories of John Elway, who was successful in making this happen, who did not want to play for the Baltimore Colts and wound up getting himself traded to the Denver Broncos, where he won 2 Super Bowls at the end of his career. There was all kinds of different reasons given for why he didn't want to go there. One of them was ridiculous. He didn't want to play in the cold. Well, Denver, you play in snow. Baltimore weather is a lot milder than it is there. And he was looking at a team which had been a mess with a bad owner in Bob Irsay. And the most important thing that they didn't want to do was have him play for Frank Kush. Kush was the coach of the team. Elway's father, Jack Elway, had been a coach like at, I want to say San Jose State, and he was familiar with Kush. Kush had been at Arizona State, and he was known for grinding up his players. He was old school tough, and, there are pictures of him on the sideline grabbing the player by the face mask when you could do those kind of things. So they didn't want him to go there. That was the big thing. And I guess nowadays you pull a power play and you say to the owner, whoever it is, I'll play for your organization, but I'm not playing for Frank Kush. Well, if you get a once-in-a-generation talent like John Elway, then you get rid of Frank Kush. And Ernie Accorsi was the GM of the Colts at the time, and he said, okay, there may be other great players in this draft, and there were, including Dan Marino and Jim Kelly also making the Hall of Fame. But he said, this is a once-in-a-lifetime quarterback, and I'm going to take him number 1, and we'll wait this out, and he's going to play with us. And, they had all kinds of leverage. They had Elway sign with the Yankees. He was not a major league prospect in any way, but he was playing for their, rookie league team just to make it seem like, okay, if you don't trade me, if you don't trade the rights to me, I'm going to play baseball. I'm never going to play football. It was not a Bo Jackson situation. That was not going to happen. But finally, Bob Irsay blinked, didn't tell his general manager, Ernie Accorsi, traded John Elway to the Denver Broncos, and a year later the Colts left town. That wasn't going to happen to the Chicago Bears, but they had options to make things. Caleb and his dad had options to make things difficult for them. Ultimately, Caleb said, "Okay, I'm going to go play for them," and he had a pretty good year. The team didn't do well, but he's certainly not a bust. And when he finally had a chance to address this as they opened up off-season workouts a week or so ago, he was good. He understood the situation and explained what happened and confirmed, we did kind of look at that, but ultimately we decided to play there. This was Wickersham yesterday on the Rich Eisen Show, guest hosted by Andrew Siciliano, and they not only talked about what was said by Caleb Williams at his news conference, but what could happen down the line if somebody does want to take it another step further and possibly, as he and his dad suggested, blow up the draft.
I think he came off like the person that I write about in the book, and that's that he's an incredibly thoughtful, studied, cautious, and, I think there was a lot of sincerity in his answer. And, that part of me, I wasn't surprised to see it because I've heard about it from others and witnessed it a little bit up close, but I also thought that it was kind of good for the world to see because, he knew, and I think that like everybody kind of involved with that knows that this is a small portion of my book. And even so, I captured a fraction of percentage of the conversations that happened, about that draft and, what, if any, Caleb Williams could do to try to have some agency over his future employer, kind of like how Eli Manning and John Elway did.
I thought he could have taken hey, this is dad, not me. Like, this is all dad. I thought he could have done that. That would have been the easy way out. If I were his old man, I might have said, hey, just blame me. But he didn't. I thought his answer, as you said, he's a thoughtful guy. I thought his answer was great. But go back to his dad here, because, listen, as you well know, he talked to any labor lawyer that would listen, like, hey, how do we get around this? Seth, do you think we get to the point, and if so, how quickly is it coming, where somebody in this NIL world where players, this generation, want more control, understandably, when someone can find a way to, quote-unquote, break the draft?
I think it's going to be a while. Maybe in the collective bargaining agreement, there might be something where the league and the owners give, but I kind of doubt it. I mean, first of all, it's a phenomenally successful event for the NFL. And, second of all, there was that run of contracts that, the super agent Tom Condon engineered that, happened before 2011. And, those quarterbacks who were getting picked overall were getting, massive deals and often holding out for those massive deals, and more power to them. But it was affecting team dynamics. And I think it affected, their ability to be successful, given that there's a salary cap, and given that, if you're paying a rookie quarterback that much money, you're limited in what you can surround him by. And, those teams, a lot of those teams picking first aren't good. So there's a lot of staff turnover that affects quarterbacks too. I think that, if you go back and you look at John Elway's press conference that he gave with his dad in April of 1983, it is really something. And you can tell that John's a little nervous and he knows this isn't going on well. This isn't coming off well, but it's really if that happened today, it's hard to imagine the waves that it would create. I mean, at one point, Jack Elway kind of mocks the Colts for having the right to pick first overall. He forgot Ernie Accorsi's name and kind of rolled his eyes as if it was irrelevant. It was a really amazing moment to go back and watch now. And when you look at what Carl and Caleb Williams considered, I mean, that was completely different. I mean, they did everything with them, within small circles, and some advisors, but it was mostly, a pretty small circle of people that were debating these things. And, at the end of the day, I think that it fell on them to say the only way that this might work is if we create an untenable situation, kind of like the Elways did with the city of Baltimore. Ryan Poles, the Bears GM, had told Caleb, we're drafting no matter what. And I think, there was some deliberation about, if we do try to force a trade by making this untenable, what if they still pick me anyway? And I have to deal with it. And at the end of the day, after his visit at the Bears facility, Caleb liked his teammates and he was excited about where the Bears organization was going to go. And he was excited to be a Bear. Obviously a tough first year. I mean, a lot of their fears came true, but now I think they have what they wanted all along, which is an innovative offensive mind whose success is tied to Caleb's success.
That's Seth Wickersham, wrote the book about quarterbacks and the story of Caleb and his dad trying to blow up the draft. It could get intriguing if somebody does try to pull this off. I'm trying to think of a franchise. Things have calmed down to some degree. Carolina, that might be a place you'd want to avoid. How many other places would you think about that? Used to be here, not anymore. But yeah, it used to say if a guy was drafted here, would he want to try to get out of it? How many careers were ruined because they went to a terrible organization like this? Let me finish up with this. This is a Nancy Armour column from USA Today, and it's about gambling. And this is a case of it's not the reality, it's the perception of the reality that counts. We know that the NFL is in bed with gambling. Gambling has proved to be very, very profitable for all sports and the NFL, and the league has partnerships with FanDuel, DraftKings, Caesars. Last year, not this past year, but the year before, the Super Bowl was held in Las Vegas. This year, an arena's naming rights belong to a gaming company is concerned about the harmful effects of gambling. What do you know? So the league announced yesterday that it's partnering with the International Center for Responsible Gaming for research into gambling by college students and athletes. The NFL is also giving the company money so that the group can update educational materials designed to prevent gambling by kids, which is really great, except for the fact that the gambling companies actually, they won't say it, but they want addicted gamblers. Those are the ones who bring in most of the cash. And preventing young people from going to these apps is going to be tough because they're on their phones, and that's where people spend most of their time these days. She talks to an economist at Holy Cross who specializes in sports and gambling, Victor Matheson. He says, the NFL does not need addicted gamblers. FanDuel and DraftKings do. So they're giving money to an organization which promotes responsible gambling. And while they would like that for the players, not necessarily for the people who bet, because the people who bet are the ones that bring in the cash. You know how the league fought this for years. Like in 2003, they didn't want to do something with the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority during the Super Bowl in 2003, which wasn't played there, but they wanted to do something in Vegas with the league, and the league said no. Tony Romo, just 10 years ago, wanted to have a fantasy football convention in Vegas. They said no. And then 2018, the Supreme Court essentially said, nah, you can do all the gambling you want. So now we have them all the time. As Nancy Armour writes here in her column, ads for gaming companies are incessant during NFL broadcasts. I saw Kevin Hart so much this season, I felt like he was part of my family. And some of the most famous alums are shilling for the sports books. DraftKings sponsors the NFL Red Zone, the Whip Around show on the NFL Network. Caesars has the naming rights to the Superdome in New Orleans, and on and on and on. So, this is, again, a case of, I think, the NFL saying, oh, no. We don't want problem gambling. So we've actually partnered with the International Center for Responsible Gaming. Now, there's no word on how much money they have given them. And I think that is also going to be intriguing. So, what's a couple $1 million to the NFL? Big deal. This is Anna Isaacson, the NFL's Senior Vice President of Social Responsibility. She said in a release, this initiative reflects our ongoing commitment to promoting responsible gambling and fostering a safe and supportive environment for athletes, fans, and communities. Blah, 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 for sure. Come on. They don't want their players gambling, and they've got all these crazy cockamamie rules, like you can bet on other sports outside the locker room. Of course, you can't bet on football. You can't go into a casino during the season. But come on. As far as the people outside the sport, no, they need to keep the trains running. They need people betting, and what they find is the most money that's bet, the majority of it comes from people who bet significantly, and some might say that they even have gambling problems. But again, it's the perception of reality, not necessarily the reality. Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.